Directions for questions 11 to 15. 4 men W, X, Y and Z and 4 women A, B, C and D are the 8 people to be seated at a rectangular table. So the men are W, X, Y and Z and the women are A, B, C and D. 3 of the people are to sit on one side of the table. 3 are to sit on the other side of the table. 1 is to sit at the head of the table and 1 is to sit at the foot of the table. So we have the table like this. Assume that this is the head of the table, so one person will be sitting here. This is the foot of the table. On this side there will be 3 people. And on this side also there will be 3 people. The following restrictions on seating arrangements must be observed. Persons of the same sex cannot sit next to each other on the same side of the table. So male and male sitting on adjacent seats on one side of the table is not allowed. Similarly, female and female sitting on adjacent seats is not allowed. The person seated at the foot of the table cannot be of the same sex as the person seated at the head of the table. So if this is male, then this should be female. It can be male and female or female and male. They should be of opposite gender. Then if you consider this also, one possible arrangement is you can have male and male like this and this will be female. And if this is male, female, male, you can see that the 2 males are not seated on adjacent seats. Then this will be female, this will be female and this will be male. And also these 2 sides can be interchanged. It can be MFM here or it can be FMF here. So this is the arrangement that has to be satisfied. There are more conditions. Y cannot be seated on the same side of the table as C. So Y and C are together on one side, that is not possible. Z cannot be seated on the same side of the table as D. So Z and D on one side of the table on adjacent seats, that is not possible. Let us start now. If Z is seated at the head of the table and C is seated in the middle seat on one side of the table, which of the following must be true? So you have the table like this. Z is seated at the head of the table like this. Now Z is male and C is seated in the middle seat on one side of the table. So C is here. C is female, so the others will be male. And here it will be in the opposite direction. So F is in the middle. So here F will be in the sides and male will be in the middle. Now on the head you have a male. So on the other side you will have a female here. Now as per this condition, Y and C cannot be seated on adjacent chairs. Now Y is a male. This cannot be Y. This cannot be Y. This is a female here. And the only male left is this person. So this cannot be Y, this cannot be Y, so this has to be Y. So look at option E. Y is seated on the opposite side of the table from C. That must be true. Hence option E is the right answer. This must be true. If D is to be seated at the head of the table, each of the following could be seated at the foot of the table except. So we have the table like this. Here you have 3 people, here you have 3 people and at the head of the table you have D and D is female. So at the foot of the table there should be a male. Now this cannot be female, this has to be male. So we need to find out the person who cannot be seated at the foot of the table. So this cannot be female. Now among the options the only female is B. So B cannot be seated here because this has to be male. So B cannot be seated here. So who cannot be seated here at the foot of the table? It is option A, B. If X is seated at the foot of the table, so you have the table like this. This is the foot of the table and X is seated at the foot of the table. Now X is male and Z is seated in an end seat on one side of the table. So you have Z here, Z is male, and C is seated in an end seat on the other side of the table. So you have C here, C is female. Where must Y be seated? So you have a male here, so this has to be female. Female, male and female. Male, female and male. Now we need to find out the position of Y. Now as per this condition, C and Y cannot be on adjacent seats. So this cannot be Y. This male cannot be Y. So this is not possible. This is female. So this cannot be Y. So the only male left is this. So this has to be Y. So the position of Y, that is option C, in an end seat on the same side of the table as Z. So on the same side of the table as Z, but on the end seat. So option C is the right answer. If Y is seated at the head of the table, so you have the table like this. Y is seated at the head of the table. So Y is here and Y is male. And W is seated in the middle seat on one side of the table. So W is here, W is male. And C is seated in the middle seat on the other side of the table. So C is here and C is female. Which of the following can be true? Now here at the head you have a male, so here you have a female. This has to be female, male and female. And this has to be male, female, male. Now you need to find out which can be true. Look at option A. A is seated at the foot of the table. At the foot of the table there should be a female. And A is female. So A can be here. So this can be true. Which of the following can be true? That is option A. That is A is seated at the foot of the table. That can be true. Hence option A is the right answer. If Y is seated at the foot of the table, so you have the table like this. Y is at the foot of the table and Y is male. So here you have a female. Z is seated in the middle seat on one side of the table. So Z is here, Z is male, and here you have a female and you have another female here. And C is seated in the middle seat on the other side of the table. So you have C here, C is female, so you have male here and male here. Then identify the person sitting at the head of the table. Now sitting at the head of the table has to be a female. As per this information, Z and D cannot be seated on adjacent seats. D is a female. So let us identify the position of D. This cannot be D, this cannot be D. Because Z and D, they cannot be seated on adjacent seats. So this cannot be D, this cannot be D, so only this can be D. And you can see that D is seated at the head of the table. So the person sitting at the head of the table is D. That is option C, D is the right answer.